Great. And in that time when you're kind of heading, like you talk about, applying pressure over a long period of time to some end result.
Yeah.
I mean, mentally, did you ever kind of feel during that time that you were worried about failing? Do you ever kind of think of giving up or trying something different because it just wasn't going to happen?
I never thought about giving up, but I think it, more another thing that I try to tell students, especially young people who are designing graduate programs, is you need to have a couple backup ideas in your pocket. When you go out to you can be sitting in your office coming up with the most beautiful conservation plan, or field study plan. You have all your data forms, everything's nice and set. You go out to the woods and suddenly there's something different. Something's either changed or something that you hadn't thought about, which can render all of your plans like you just can't do it. So you need to modify that. I do think there needs to be a lot of flexibility in your mentality when you go in to do some work like this. I had, especially to be in a remote place, no internet, no electricity, in a truck in the Russian woods in winter. At the start of the program, the PhD program, we had a lot of trouble catching owls, which was the key to the project. So it was pretty demoralizing, and there were week-long periods where my mental health was not good. As we're trying different things to get these birds, because you're right. I mean, if I didn't catch the owls, the whole PhD would have fallen apart.
You just spend a load of money, someone's money, in doing it, and you're away from your family and.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was a combination of adaptability and luck that made us able to finally start catching these birds.
And when you're kind of working out there, you mentioned you're living in small confined spaces with your kind of colleagues there, but you also met a lot of eccentric people, some of them who you were working with, some you just kind of came across. Who do you feel was kind of oddest character that you came across, or the most memorable? Or
the oddest character, I'd say the most intriguing character was there's this this man we met, a hermit living alone in the woods. He had sort of occupied an abandoned hydroelectric station, and he was really quite. He'd been living there for about 10 years in the forest alone when we came upon him, and there were some owls nearby that we were trying to catch, and he let us live with him, which was great. Very nice fellow, but very mysterious, very cagey about his past. And I would ask him more direct questions about his past, and he wouldn't really answer it. But then some of the Russians talked to him and were able to kind of piece things out. Like, he had spent some time with the KGB at some point in the Merchant Marines in his youth, and he'd been living in the forest because he was running away from some bad businessmen who he had a bad deal with, and was hiding in the woods for his life, essentially. And he was missing half of his pinky. And at one point I asked him about it, and he said, that's in the past. I don't want to, So almost like, if he'd been chopping wood and cut off his finger, he'd be like, oh yeah, damnedest thing, I cut off my finger chopping wood. But if you're like, I don't want to talk about why I lost my finger, it just seemed like there was something, about that story. But he also had very strange beliefs. He believed that the mountain that was kind of loomed over the valley and his home was hollow, and that there were men living inside who were guarding this holy water, essentially.
Wow.
And that, yeah, so that, yeah, he was pretty interesting.
And so you're out there, you kind of did all this field work, you made the kind of conservation plans, and then you kind of now shifted into a role for WCS where you're this kind of Russia and Northeast Asia coordinator.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a large area to coordinate, but
it is.
So what does it mean on like a day-to-day basis? What does your kind of typical day look like?
Yeah, well, let me just add quickly that I think I'm in a lucky position where a lot of people, they finish their degree programs, they come up with conservation recommendations, write it up, and it goes on the shelf, and that's it. And then they transition to some other career or other aspect. Maybe they're working for a federal agency. I feel like I'm lucky in the sense that, you know, I came up with these conservation recommendations, but then by staying engaged in the region and with the species, I've been able since 2011 to then slowly enact some of those recommendations. So I feel really lucky in that sense that, fish shells, black-listed fish shells are under better protection now than they were 10 years ago because of the work that my Russian colleagues and I have been doing. So since then, as I said, I'm the Russia and Northeast Asia coordinator. Mostly that refers to two things. I try to coordinate the actions of WCS programs in Russia and China with respect to tigers. And then I try to coordinate WCS program responses across Asia from the Arctic to the tropics on migratory bird issues. So those are the themes that I work on. And fish owls are maybe 5% of my overall job right now. So I still do fish owl work every year. So while those are the themes, in reality, this is what I do. I sit here at my computer. I write grant proposals. I write reports. If I'm lucky and there's not a global pandemic ravaging the globe, I'm able to go to Russia. I usually travel about 3 months out of the year to different field sites to either be involved in field work or go to meetings and such. So it's a lot of desk work, especially since I have kids now. I don't travel as much as I used to. That's a conscious decision to stay at home more than not.
So all the people, you're kind of the different teams you're trying to coordinate. Are you kind of, what's your role? Are you kind of the annoying person from afar that kind of bombards them with 20 emails a day demanding stuff, or are you there kind of basically their slave, where you're kind of trying to raise money for them and enable them to survive and do what they want to do, or a combination of those things? Or
yeah, it's not much of the former. It's a little more of the latter. So a good example is, a species of global concern, at least in Asia, is the spoonbill sandpiper. It's the most endangered shorebird and migratory shorebird in Asia. Breeds in the Russian Arctic, winters in places like Myanmar, Bangladesh. So WCS has country programs in Russia, in Myanmar, in Bangladesh. And they're all involved to some degree in habitat conservation issues that are relevant to spoonbill sandpipers, but the programs haven't been talking to each other to coordinate that. So I'm helping WCS is helping a Russian NGO establish a protected area for these birds in the Russian Arctic. And then, I was looking at where they're breeding in Bangladesh, and there's a WCS has just helped set up a new marine protected area, Nijam Dweep, I think it's called, if I pronounced that correctly.
Nijam Dweep, yeah.
But the focus of the WCS Bangladesh program is the marine mammals. They're looking out at the water. They're not looking at the shore. So in looking at the map of this new protected area, there's some sites that are known to be important for spoonbill sandpipers, but WCS wasn't paying any attention to that. So I said, hey, Bangladesh program, let's think about that. Let's talk to Siam Chowdhury and see if we can get him involved. So WCS Bangladesh contracted with Siam to go do these surveys of some of these islands. Found spoonbill sandpipers, identified conservation issues, and then is incorporating. And we are now helping incorporate some of his conservation recommendations into the management of the protected area. So that's an example where WCS Bangladesh would not have been thinking about that at all had I not sent them an email and started that conversation. So that's essentially what I'm trying to do across Asia with migratory birds, is link our programs and different habitats that are important for these birds at different stages of their annual cycle.
Yeah. So yeah, this sounds like it must be fun, kind of on an intellectual level, to be involved in so many different areas and so many different landscapes, but a bit not as visceral as the experience you had before. And I'm wondering, like, I feel like this current pandemic has highlighted the kind of strengths and weaknesses of how kind of conservation has been operating so far. Have you seen any kind of changes either in your work or how you see conservation going in the future as a result of this? Or do you think it's going to be a temporary blip and everyone will go back to business as usual?
Well, I mean, I think as far as, a lot of what I've been doing in Southeast Asia has been conferences. And I think that that's something that's going to change. I think that's become clear that, we can, there's nothing will ever replace, the after hours part of a conference where you and some potential collaborators sit down in the corner of a bar and hash out a potential future project. I mean, that's still really important. And I think that's going to be hard to replicate online. But as far as just general communication of ideas and just general collaborations, I think that's very possible in the format we're using now. I will say that the work that we do in Russia has not been much impacted by the pandemic, and I think a reason for that has been our emphasis on capacity building for the last 20 years. I feel like we've been able to develop strong partners and support the professional development of students to graduate students to then people in employment at protected areas, et cetera. So that just because people like me can't go there doesn't mean that the work doesn't happen. I'm still there was fish off field work this spring, and I was supposed to go take part in that, but it didn't really matter that I didn't go because the Russians I work with are extremely competent individuals who can do everything without me. It's at the point where it's more of a selfish interest of getting my boots dirty and sleeping in a tent along a river, just kind of reminding myself why I do this and why I find this fun. But I don't really have to be there. I can stay here in Minnesota, write the grant, collect the information, and then write the reports. I think the future will be a hybrid, but it's not going to go back to what it was. I don't think.
Right. Yeah. And